Shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid? And the people not be afraid. Shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid?
Dreams.
Dreams.
American dreams.
Dreams.
Shalom, family. Welcome to Shattered Paradigm.
Dreams.
As the chosen remnant of Israel and the elect of the nations begin to awaken from this collective sleep paralysis, we can see this mass media-induced dreamscape shattering right before our eyes. The global elite's facade of credibility and truth is crumbling, only to reveal its hideous true image of festering putrid corruption, unquenchable greed, and seething hatred. Many of us are now fully conscious and have taken a glimpse at this new world order, communist, fascist, global superstate, and have seen it for what it really is, a giant malignant tumor, a huge parasite on the back of humanity, feeding off our labor and sweat equity. And though they have stolen so much for so long, the good news is that this insatiable tapeworm is now beginning to eat itself.
Yes, that's exactly what we are seeing. There's an internal power struggle taking place within the global cabal. The rollout of this pandemic vaccine agenda has been littered with mistakes and blunders, leaving some of their most recognizable figureheads exposed. They've underestimated the power of the awakening, and now that a contingent of informed citizens had been continually shining a light on the systemic corruption, the Great Reset is beginning to fracture into different factions.
Bill Gates, Anthony Fauci, and the Wuhan Lab, once untouchable and celebrated as pure and virtuous, but now are being attacked and questioned by the same media that once covered up their every crime. But why? Let's look at Bill Gates.
This morning, new questions are swirling around the state of Bill and Melinda Gates' marriage, leading up to last week's divorce announcement. The Wall Street Journal reporting Melinda began talking to divorce attorneys roughly 2 years before the filing. Last week, the multi-billionaires announced in a joint statement they were ending their 25-year marriage because we no longer believe we can grow together as a couple in this next phase of our lives. The Journal citing several people reporting that one source of concern for Melinda, a global advocate for women and girls, was Bill's dealings with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. According to documents obtained by the Journal, Melinda and her advisors held a number of calls with divorce lawyers in October 2019. The same month, the New York Times first reported that Bill met with Epstein on numerous occasions, starting in 2011, after Epstein had served time for soliciting prostitution. The Times reporting one stay at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse lasted late into the night, according to more than a dozen people familiar with the relationship. In late 2019, Gates was asked about his meetings and relationship with Epstein.
Gates gave a statement to the Wall Street Journal where he insisted he did not have any business relationship or friendship with Epstein. But new reporting from the New York Times outlines numerous meetings between Gates and Epstein and a conversation with Bill and Melinda Gates' foundation, a connection between their foundation and J.P. Morgan to set up a charitable fund that would financially benefit Epstein. You know what I want to know? Why?
You know, I made a mistaken judgment that I thought that those discussions would lead literally to billions of dollars going to global health. Turned out that was a bad judgment. That was a mirage. None of that money ever appeared.
The sinister powers behind this case, both involving the mysterious death of Epstein himself and the way that he was able to wield power at the highest level of American society for decades with impunity. So the first stunning development broke Friday in news that the prison guards tasked with guarding Epstein the night that he allegedly committed suicide admitted to falsifying records, but will avoid jail time. So according to the plea deal reached with prosecutors, the two guards, Tova Novell and Michael Thomas, were supposed to check up on inmates, including Epstein, twice an hour. However, video footage from the night of Epstein's alleged suicide shows them both at their desks browsing the internet for furniture, motorcycles, and sports news.
The two Bureau of Prison guards assigned to monitor Jeffrey Epstein the night he killed himself, they've admitted they falsified records, and they've now made a deal with federal prosecutors. Their sentence, 100 hours of community service. Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse ripping the deal tonight, saying, quote, "This is unacceptable. Epstein's victims have been failed at every single turn. The public deserves a full report of the Bureau of Prisons' failures."
And just to give you an idea of what failure looks like, look no further than the recent revelations from the divorce of Bill and Melinda Gates. Now look, the tawdry details of Gates complaining to Epstein repeatedly about the state of his marriage and hanging out and all of that aside, the question remains, what was Bill Gates getting from Jeffrey Epstein he couldn't get anywhere else? His previous explanations say that it was related to a bizarre financing scheme for philanthropy. But some new revelations actually shed even more light on that. Gates staffers tell the Daily Beast that Gates justified his dozens of hangouts with Epstein by saying the disgraced pedophile was going to help him get a Nobel Peace Prize. What? Why would a man who had been charged with trafficking underage girls for sex be able to assist with that? Let's dig deeper. So according to the reporting, Gates not only noticed that Epstein was friends with him, but multiple other powerful people. Gates reportedly saw Epstein as his, quote, sure ticket. But the reporting gets even more bizarre. In Gates' bid to get the Nobel Peace Prize, he had a meeting with the head of the Nobel Committee, Mr. Thorbjorn Jagland, in 2013. And guess who facilitated and accompanied Gates in that meeting? Epstein, along with other prominent so-called philanthropists who had been receiving Epstein funding. This is yet another example of this ultimate question. How does he know all these people? Where did this money come from? As I have posed in a recent segment on Epstein, Bill Gates is either the richest or the second richest man in the world. Almost every prominent person in the world will pick up if he calls them. Any bank, any president, any philanthropist. Why did he need a disgraced pedophile to help him get a Nobel Peace Prize? He could have gotten help from so many others. Why did he need Epstein's help financing anything? He's got $130 billion. The answer to that question belies not only much of Gates' own very questionable conduct, but will hopefully unravel the ongoing mystery as to how exactly the wealthiest and most powerful people in the world all seemingly knew Epstein, worked with him, allowed their influence to be subject to his dealings with other wealthy people, and ultimately commit crimes for many years to come. But you go and you see the Nobel Peace, that's where I'm like, I actually believe that. Because Bill Gates is a total narcissist. He thinks he's like the greatest thing that's ever happened to humanity.
Right.
His foundation has been pumping all this money into malaria, but he really wants that Nobel Peace Prize. And Epstein, somehow, through all of his funding, machinations, whatever, maybe blackmail, allegedly, all of that, seems to know all the guys on the Nobel Committee. I mean, you can't deny that. The Norwegian press revealed, last year that he had met with the head of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee. I mean, that's insane. He's the one who facilitated the meeting between him and Gates. And look, I know all these conspiracy theories about cabals and all stuff, 99.9% of it is false, but sometimes it's true. And like in this particular case, what else can you conclude? That Gates knows, again, one of the richest people in the world for decades.
Right.
He has to use this guy to get him to the Nobel Committee, but seemingly, Gates probably been trying to get a meeting for a long time, but Epstein's the guy who can deliver.
The one that made it happen.
Look.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
This guy's on a sex offender registry.
Yes.
This is all in the public sphere.
One Google search away.
And you're still hanging around with him. You're one of the richest people on the planet, and this is the guy you're going to for advice. You're going to help you get your Nobel Peace Prize. Like, what are you doing? And the thing is that, again, if it was just one weirdo like Bill Gates, you could be like, all right, well, I guess he just has a really bad judgment.
Right.
But the fact that this pattern just seems to repeat itself over and over again with person after person after person, you're like, all of these people just had a complete failure in any sort of rational or pragmatic decision making. They're all brought in by this guy. They're all lured in by him. They all continue to associate him with him. What is going on here?
Yes, and that is why, I didn't want to focus on the tabloid stuff. All the like Gates hanging out with him dozens of times, complaining about his marriage. Although I do think that is part of it because it does show some comfort. And clearly somebody was in that room and is leaking all of this. Maybe, Melinda Gates' divorce team, congratulations. But the real important part was when I saw the Nobel Peace Prize, because I said, oh, this is about leveraging networks of power, where Gates wants to go and buy the Nobel Peace Prize, I guess when you're the richest man in the world. And whenever you're one of those people, you turn to the fixers, right? Like the people who can go and solve these types of problems for you. And so this is Epstein in this particular case, which just actually does tell you how powerful he was within that elite network. And you think about that again in the context of how we know all the revelations. Leon Black, $150 million payment. In 2 years, for what? Again, he says it's for tax advice. What tax advice is this? You're worth $9 billion. You can't go to Goldman. You don't think Goldman's been helping rich people skirt taxes for years? You can go to every wealth
experts on that.
Exactly. You can go to any wealth management division across the country. Then you go and you think about Leslie Wexner. And you think about the original origins, and it's like a pattern that cascades itself up to the very top of elites, both in terms of the social elite, like the Nobel Peace Prize and all that, and the financial elite. And I can't help but conclude that we are not getting the full story.
I have to start off with Bill Gates, because this has very much been in the headlines, not his personal life, but where it relates to Microsoft's workplace policies and culture. Gates' reps have acknowledged that he had an affair with a Microsoft employee that started a little over 20 years ago, I believe, while he was still chairman of the board and a C-suite executive as chief software architect. So what I'm wondering is that acceptable in today's Microsoft? And if not, do you have policies in place? Are you making policies to discourage that sort of behavior in the C-suite going forward?
John, the Microsoft of 2021 is very different from the Microsoft of 2000, and where you have to disclose any relationships. And overall, the power dynamic in the workplace is not something that can be abused in any form.
Though in no way do we believe Melinda Gates is some naive, innocent victim, knowing her history of eugenics and the history of her family, it's clear that the media has been directed to cast her in the role of the moral and just character, who no doubt in this age of women empowerment and feminism will do a more efficient job of carrying on the deadly legacy of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is another sleight of hand, a misdirection illusion used by the master magicians behind the mainstream media.
Now we see the pandemic's golden boy, the New World Order's MVP, Dr. Anthony Fauci, being thrown under the proverbial bus by his handlers. And just a few months ago, no one could even give the slightest critique about Mr. Fauci without being attacked by a barrage of fraudulent fact-checking liberal lunatics. But I guess what goes up must come down, and what's done in the dark must be brought to the light.
Anyone who questioned the origin of the C-19 was ridiculed as a baseless conspiracy theorist, but now some of the globalists are so spooked that they're cutting ties with Fauci in the Wuhan lab, allowing them both to take the fall, so the true architects of this pandemic can escape scot-free.
The tide is turning. You're now seeing liberal networks today talking about the possibility that this virus came out of a lab. You had the Wall Street Journal publish this week that 3 lab workers were in the hospital in November with a COVID-like infection. So the dam's about to burst. And I think one reason Dr. Fauci is so sensitive about this subject is he's not going to be able to escape that the NIH gave this lab money. But now it looks like there's more and more evidence that it came from the lab. Yeah. This is going to be a bad day for Dr. Fauci when it comes out that the virus came from the lab.
About $600,000 over a period of 5 years. So it was a modest amount. There was nothing in the grant application that would call for what is referred to as gain of function. Gain of function meaning taking a virus that could infect humans and making it either more transmissible and or pathogenic to humans.
Okay, so a couple things in there. Take the value of the dollars he mentioned, $600,000 over 5 years. Is that a lot? Does that matter?
Well, sure, it's a lot. And actually, there are some reports that it added up to millions over time. But the other thing he said is that there was no gain of function in the application. There are scientists who have looked at the application and absolutely and categorically disagree with him. They say the application did include gain of function. The other evidence we have is that Dr. Shi from the Wuhan lab published a paper that is clearly about gain of function. And in that, she thanks Dr. Fauci and his group for funding that paper. So there's a lot of contradictions going on. The bottom line is he cannot investigate himself. He was responsible for giving this money, so he has every incentive to cover it up and not reveal the truth about it, because if the pandemic did come from the lab, he would have great culpability in this. So he can't be investigating this, nor can any of his people that he picks be investigating this. He needs to be excluded from the investigation.
So you allege today this is a cover-up.
Will you, in front of this group, categorically say that the COVID-19 could not have occurred through serial passage in a laboratory?
I do not have any accounting of what the Chinese may have done, and I'm fully in favor of any further investigation of what went on in China. However, I will repeat again, the NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
You do support it in the U.S. We have 11 labs doing it, and you have allowed it here. We have a committee to do it, but the committee has granted every exemption. You're fooling with Mother Nature here. You're allowing super viruses to be created with a 15% mortality. It's very dangerous. I think it was a huge mistake to share this with China, and it's a huge mistake to allow this to continue in the United States. And we should be very careful to investigate where this virus came from.
I fully agree that you should investigate where the virus came from. But again, we have not funded gain-of-function research on this virus in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, no matter how many times you say it.
There was research. There was research done with Dr. Shi and Dr. Barrick. They have collaborated on gain-of-function research where they enhanced the SARS virus to infect human airway cells, and they did it by merging a new spike protein on it. That is gain-of-function. That was joint research between the Wuhan Institute and Dr. Barrick. You can't deny it. I think the most important thing is that the investigation can't be done by the WHO or an international group, but it also can't be done by Americans who are involved with funding the lab. So Dr. Fauci and his handpicked person from EcoHealth, they can't investigate themselves because they gave the money to the lab. They have a conflict of interest and a desire to make sure nothing bad is discovered that could have occurred with NIH money. So they can't be the investigators either. And this is very important. I think Dr. Fauci should be made to testify under oath about the money that was given to the lab. And the good news is yesterday I passed an amendment on the Senate floor that says no more gain-of-function money can be sent to China. This is very important because this could happen again. I mean, they are experimenting with the SARS virus, which is 15 times more deadly than COVID-19. COVID-19 kills about 1%, but that's been 3 million people, more than 3 million people. If SARS got out of the lab, that could be 50 million people. So this is a very important task ahead of us.
Okay.
We have 11 labs in our country that do this kind of research.
You raise a number of interesting points. Let me see if I can knock off as many as I can in the next few minutes here. We are told that the NSC, the National Security Council, is the one that's running this investigation now. Is that acceptable?
I think it needs to be a bipartisan commission, not just the administration. I think really this should not be a partisan issue. And I think yesterday we demonstrated that Democrats will vote for some repercussions on this. But I don't know that the administration can investigate this, particularly since they've shut down the previous administration's investigation. So I'm worried that they're trying to cover up the government's involvement, our government's involvement in funding this research.
They would argue they haven't shut it down, and I mean, maybe it is just a question of whether it's in this silo at the State Department or in this silo over here at the National Security Council. Stand by for more on that.
There could be a cover-up because there's an incentive by people like Dr. Fauci not to reveal anything because he would be then culpable because he was in charge of funding this lab.
Okay, one more thing I want to squeeze in here. The National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, James Freeman wrote about this in the Wall Street Journal a few days ago.
One of the strongest evidence that this came from the lab is they haven't been able to find the virus in any animal. They tested thousands of animals in the wet market. None of them tested positive for COVID. So there's a lot of things that need to be investigated. But so far, a lot of the evidence is pointing towards the lab.
Well, Senator, thank you for coming on today. It continues, okay? The mystery there deepens. Rand Paul.
While all of this is going down, casualties from the Serpent Serum vax scheme are mounting up.
And tributes have been paid to the first man to receive the coronavirus vaccine who has died from an unrelated illness. 81-year-old Bill Shakespeare received his jab last December whilst at hospital in Coventry.
The family of BBC Radio Newcastle presenter Lisa Shaw say she died after suffering blood clots just over a week after receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine. The 44-year-old from County Durham died last Friday.
The statements released in the last hour says she fell seriously ill after having the vaccine.
Well, relatives have said that Lisa developed severe headaches a week after receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine and then became severely ill a few days later. She died at Newcastle's RVI last Friday afternoon, having been treated in intensive care for blood clots and bleeding. Now, the BBC is reporting that it's seen an interim fact of death certificate, which lists the vaccine as one of the possible factors being considered.
The CDC is investigating a heart issue in young men who got the vaccine.
This morning, the CDC is reviewing several dozen reports that teenagers and young adults may have developed a heart condition after getting vaccinated against COVID-19. While the agency has not determined whether the vaccine caused the condition, it is alerting pediatricians to be on the lookout for symptoms. The cases seem to appear about 4 days after some teenagers and young adults received their second dose of the Pfizer or Moderna shot.
A Draper teenager hospitalized with blood clots, and tonight, we are hearing from his mother. She spoke with ABC4's Nick McGurk, who joins us live just outside of Corner Canyon High School. Nick, what did she have to say?
She says her son, Everest Romney, is 6'9" tall. He's a 17-year-old, as healthy as you could ever imagine. At 6'9", he plays basketball for Corner Canyon High. So the question is this: how did someone that she says had no underlying health conditions, was extremely healthy, end up in the ICU with a number of blood clots in and around his brain? Everything we're about to tell you is based on what his mother told me over a Zoom call just minutes ago. Let's talk about the timeline here. On April 21st, 17-year-old Everest Romney got his vaccine shot. This was his first shot. The next day, he complained of a sore neck, had swelling in his neck. A few days later, Everest couldn't even move his neck because of the swelling without literally putting his hands on his cheeks or on his head to move his neck. Now, the pediatrician told Everest's mother that he thought it could be a pulled neck muscle from all the basketball that Everest plays. He plays a high contact sport, and, looking back, his mother acknowledges maybe this shot could have caused some kind of inflammation that was exacerbated by the competitive basketball that Everest plays. But let's get back to that timeline. At the time, his mother knew the swelling, those constant headaches, even a developing fever. It had to be something she knew, but the pediatrician prescribed antibiotics, she says, a neck brace for a possible pulled muscle. Meantime, Everest, he just kept playing basketball. And then the migraine started. His mother finally got him a CT scan. Then she got another one ordered on his head, and that is when doctors found out he had 2 blood clots inside his brain, another on the outside of his brain.
The hardest thing was I let him get that shot. And he was healthy and well before. And I was doing my best, and I thought it was the right thing to do. And I don't want to discourage any parents from not doing that. But you question. You can't help but question it when it all goes wrong.
I got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine yesterday. Nobody knows if this is the reason that all this stuff is going on, but started with chest pain, paralysis on my left side. I was rushed over via ambulance to Baylor, Dallas, where I have had numerous scans done. I have had about 8 seizures in the last 2 days. Never had a seizure before. They did find a 3 millimeter brain aneurysm.
blood clot.
Thousands of awakened Israelites and the elect of the nations have been in prayer and fasting, asking the Most High Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to intervene on our behalf, rout our enemies, confound and confuse their ranks. We've prayed that Abba Yah would smite the captains and the mighty men and bring derision and destruction to their schemes and treachery. And hallelujah, we give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High, who has heard the cries of his servants and lent ear to the voice of his saints.
But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy unto thine enemies, and an adversary unto thine adversaries. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth. Tell the truth. He controls all the newspapers and the televisions.
The script is written. All the actors are in place. They have rehearsed their lines. They know their role and will not break character. The whole world is a stage. But who or what is truly behind the curtain? The true many-faced God, the God of theater, has now cloaked and hidden himself beneath his most deceptive disguise ever.
No eye shall see me.
Using mask and clever impersonation, peering through one eye, this elusive Phantom of the Opera has fooled the world and deceived many into poisoning themselves with an ornament of death.
You gotta know the truth, because the truth will set you free.
Disguiseth his face.
But we see right through the facade.
Because your number is up.
And we give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High God of Israel. Through his power, we have unmasked the deception. We've caught him red-handed.
Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works.
Shalom family, we want to take a moment to share a little bit about our latest video project, It Has a Phase 3. As many of you may know, about 2 years ago, all of our channels were completely demonetized, so we created our very own website and started a Patreon, and these platforms have been a huge help. So even though YouTube has shadow banned, censored, and even deleted some of our content, The Most High has used our supporters to keep us in the fight. So our new presentation, It Has a Face 3 Posthuman, is the third installment in our It Has a Face series, and we believe this is the most powerful information we have ever uncovered. It's an hour and 28 minutes of uncensored, unfiltered, spiritually challenging information, so we strongly suggest to pray before watching for those who decide to support our ministry and watch our new presentation. Spiritual discernment is key. Again, thank you to all our viewers, our supporters, and prayer warriors who have fought alongside us throughout the years. Shalom.